I'm Chris Archer from Cloud Computing Australasia. Joining me today is Scott Stewart, CIO of Wilson HTM Investment Group. Scott, what do you believe is driving the cloud phenomenon at the moment, and how is cloud computing changing the way organisations consume IT?
It's a very good question because it is a fundamental change to the way organisations are buying IT, and that's, I think, the interesting thing about cloud computing, because there's a lot of focus on technology. There's a lot of talk about what is it and trying to define it, whether it's a product, whether it's a particular type of technology, but it actually is it's a fundamental transformation in how organisations are deploying and buying or procuring IT. And I like the analogy, because you asked what's driving it. So I like the analogy that I've seen out there in relation to, it's like the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and that sounds pretty big, right? And it took a long time, but really what happened with that is that there was a concept, there was the suitability. In other words, it suited organisations to industrialise and mechanise, and then came the technology. But the last thing that came was the attitude. And once you get all those components, that's when the transformation starts. So it's not actually a technology or a product, it's actually the way we deploy IT, and it makes a lot of sense. So when something makes sense, businesses will do it because they understand commodity, they understand that it's a smarter way to buy IT and deploy it. And if you have a look at the history of IT, over half of all IT projects fail to deliver. So the business is looking for a new way. They're looking for a new way to make a technology work, and cloud computing is that transformation, and it is driving
that next step. Why do you think cloud computing is so misunderstood, and what can technologists on both the buy and sell side do to rectify this?
I think that why it's misunderstood is the confusion and all the effort around trying to define what it is. And if you look at the previous analogy I used around Industrial Revolution, even getting a definition of that today is difficult. So, but we all understand why the business needs to do it. And so I think the key is to put it into language that the business understands. It's to put it into talk about commodity instead of talking about desktop as a service and infrastructure as a service. It's the language we use, but it's also really, I think, trying to understand the different deployment models of cloud and how businesses can benefit. What's the business benefit that they can gain from applying each of those deployment models, and building a business case that looks at the financials, the return on the investment, the difference between capital expenditure and operational expenditure, and break it down into language that the business understands. I think that's really the key, very, very important.
So we're talking about the language and the deployment.
Yeah.
Essentially.
It's understanding it and using the right language of the business.
Great. Now, Australian businesses are not renowned for being early adopters of new technologies. I guess, however, given the substantial organic growth and thriving M&A environment here, would you say that this particular technology represents an opportunity that Australia should embrace, and in what ways can it benefit consolidation?
Look, it's all about consolidation, and it's all about transforming. And for a business, if they have implementing a cloud computing strategy, they will find that they have to lift the lid on their IT systems, on their ecosystem as we call it, and they have to make a lot of decisions about consolidating their data centers and consolidating their systems, improving the way IT is delivered, and that's what cloud computing does. If you maintained an internal hosted data center, outsourced model, it's kind of like more of the same. It's what you have now somewhere else. Whereas with the transformation to cloud computing, you basically move your applications, from the current location or the current environment into a cloud computing framework or a platform. And as you do that, it requires a lot of work, and you usually have to revisit your processes. You have to revisit some of your previous purchasing decisions around IT, and it creates a lot of effort around improvement, and all that is very, very good, because it enables the business to consolidate, readdress the licensing, and there's a lot of efficiencies and cost improvements that can be gained from this whole kind of transformation process.
So Scott, you're adopting a cloud computing strategy currently. What advice can you give to those looking to choose a vendor in this space?
Yeah, look, there's a lot that actually hasn't changed in that front. In other words, you still have the same considerations about counterparty risk, about the construction of the legal, contracts, exit clauses, step-in rights. There's a whole range of vendor management issues, and so it's very, very similar to outsourcing, obviously. So I think the fact that a lot of businesses have used outsourcing in the past will help them and put them into a good frame of mind about how they would manage the due diligence on a cloud computing vendor. So there's still a lot of the same principles apply, and you really do need good vendor management skills. You kind of move from managing your own infrastructure to managing someone else who's managing infrastructure. So it does raise new challenges. But certainly the business benefits outweigh that, and it just means you have to shift your focus. So I think the tips are certainly around doing the normal due diligence on the vendor, how strong are they, sustainable, what would happen if you needed to step in, and how would you do that. So we spent a lot of time on that, and for a long time it was all legal work, and for a long time it was all financial work. Very little technical involvement in getting our business case together. It was a lot of financial, a lot of legal work. So you do have to be very careful. I mean, there's great opportunities in cloud computing. Of course, there's risks, and you must be very diligent in how you manage those risks.
So there's much debate around the security of cloud computing. Can cloud solutions really be applied to financial services safely, and are there any areas to avoid?
Yeah, I think that there definitely are. I mean, a lot of discussion on cloud talks about public cloud versus private cloud. And public cloud obviously is the one area that people are a little bit concerned about with security. Who's accessing their data? Where is their data? So they tend to move to private cloud. I suspect that what we call hybrid cloud, which is almost a mix of both. In our organisation, we actually went one step into a safer, secure environment, and what I call trusted cloud, which is a completely different model again. It's very close to private cloud, but it gives us a lot more assurances around the privacy and the security. So it's still very valid concern. There still will be situations where you will have a cloud model for a lot of your infrastructure and a lot of your systems, but some data sets or systems will be potentially hosted so that you can maintain that level of security. But certainly knowing where your data is important, and most of the CIOs I speak with in financial services, and the same as my experience, the privacy and the security aspects are actually the most easiest to solve. So it didn't become an issue, but you still obviously have to address it. You still have to put a lot of energy into it. But obviously, with all the talk about security and privacy, there's a lot of investment and there's a lot of thought processes in how we could solve the issues, and certainly we found they were the most easiest to solve.
Okay, great. Now, you're an advocate for ensuring that the IT is synchronised with commercial goals. What tips can you give to ICT professionals, for example, in winning board support or improving reporting? And essentially, do you see technologists having to evolve their skills?
Absolutely. My experience as CIO has been one that, I've been, as I mentioned earlier, I've been more an accountant, more a lawyer, and much less a technologist. And for 30 years, the industry's been talking about being aligned with the business, and business and IT alignment is this major issue. And I don't think we've really effectively, universally, we certainly haven't solved it. And there have been businesses that have done well in that respect. But maintaining it is difficult, and what actually is alignment. So there's we have this sort of issue where the IT industry evolved out of the sciences, and you have the business side of it, and we always talk about business and IT, and there's always this natural separation. So I'm a firm believer in trying to bridge that, and I think a key is technologists who either need to learn business acumen and business skills. They need to know about a balance sheet, a profit and loss. They need to know about EBITDA, and all the ratios, etc. Because the business really want to know about the impact of things. Something such as implementing a cloud strategy has such an impact on the P&L and on the balance sheet. And as a CIO, you've got to know how to present that analysis. And so very, very important. And there's a lot of discussion. Should the CIO come out of the business and learn IT and bring that skill that way? Or should the technologist, a CIO, come out of the technology space? And if they do, how do they acquire business skills? And it's a big challenge, but something that I think is critically important, and it's certainly helped me. And in this case, for me, it just confirmed that you just have to have the financial management skills, and you have to have the business acumen to be successful.
Now, maybe you could explore for us the topic that you'll be discussing at the conference. What are going to be some key points that you'll talk to delegates about?
I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on trying to define, for instance, when we talk about cloud computing, what it is, and talk about the technology aspects. And I'm not the best qualified to do that. So I talk more about how the business can use it to obtain better business value, to improve the experience of the end user, their customer, and how they can achieve more profitable IT technology operations, how they can have efficiencies, improve their processes, and just really the general business value that can be achieved from technology. So I will talk about why it's difficult to define cloud computing, but I will really get down to how you build a business case, and how you can understand it, and you can get in front of your board and you can explain what it is, what the benefit will be, why we need to do it, and what are the risks, and what are the things we need to manage to get to do it properly.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
No problems, Chris. Yeah.